The little girl's scream cut through the night like shattered glass. Emma! Everything stopped. The rain. The voices. Even the engines outside the unfinished restaurant. Emma turned so fast her chair crashed backward onto the wooden floorboards. Mason was already moving toward the front entrance before anyone else understood what happened. Then the scream came again. Louder. Terrified. Please help him, why, Mom? Mason ripped the restaurant door open. A little girl no older than 8 stood outside barefoot in the rain, shaking uncontrollably. Her blonde hair clung to her face. Mud covered her knees. Blood stained one sleeve of her tiny jacket. And behind her, a car burned upside down in a ditch beside the highway. Emma's stomach dropped instantly. Oh my God! The child grabbed Mason's arm with trembling fingers. They took her. Mason crouched immediately. Who took her? The girl tried speaking, but broke into sobs instead. Emma ran outside despite Rosie yelling after her. Smoke twisted into the stormy sky from the wrecked vehicle. One headlight flickered weakly against the rain. The smell of gasoline filled the air. Mason's expression darkened the second he saw the tire tracks. Multiple vehicles. Forced off the road. This wasn't an accident. The little girl finally managed to whisper 2 words. They had patches. Mason froze. Not Hell's Angels patches. Different ones. Emma suddenly remembered the sound from weeks earlier. Those motorcycles on the highway. The ones Mason warned her about. And the look on his face now terrified her more than the burning car. Because Mason recognized them. The Reapers, he muttered quietly. Rosie stepped outside, holding a blanket around her shoulders. What's happening? Mason didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed locked on the darkness beyond the highway. Then finally, we need to leave now. The little girl's name was Lily. She sat trembling in the back room of the half-built restaurant while Rosie cleaned cuts on her arms. Emma knelt beside her carefully holding a warm cup of cocoa. It's okay, Emma whispered softly. But Lily kept shaking her head. No, it's not. Mason stood near the window talking quietly with 2 bikers. Emma noticed something different about him tonight. Fear. Not for himself. For them. That scared her more than anything. Finally Mason walked over. When did it happen? Lily sniffled hard. We were driving home, and motorcycles came behind us. Her voice cracked. They hit our car. Rosie covered her mouth. Lily continued trembling. Mom told me to run. What did the men look like? Mason asked. They wore black jackets with skulls. Mason closed his eyes briefly. The Reapers Motorcycle Club. One of the most violent biker gangs left in the state. Older, bigger, crueler. And they hated the Hell's Angels. Especially Mason. Emma slowly stood. Why would they take her mother? Mason looked at her carefully. Because they're sending me a message. Silence filled the room instantly. Rosie's face went pale. What? Mason rubbed his jaw slowly. Mercer had connections inside prison. Before he got arrested, he reached out to people. Emma felt cold all over again. You're saying this is because of me? No, Mason said firmly. But you're part of it now. That sentence hit harder than she expected. Part of it now. Not a bullied girl anymore. Not just a waitress from a broken restaurant. Now she stood inside something dangerous and violent, and far bigger than Black Creek itself. And deep down, she knew there was no going back. But things got worse an hour later. Because the phone rang. Everyone froze immediately. Mason slowly answered it. Silence. Then his expression changed. Dark, cold. Emma couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but she saw Mason's hand tighten around the phone hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Finally he spoke. You touch that woman again, and I'll bury every one of you. The line went dead. Rosie whispered softly, Mason. But he was already walking toward the door. Emma followed immediately. What did they say? Mason stopped beneath the unfinished restaurant sign, swaying in the rain. They want me. For what? Mason stared out toward the dark highway. An old debt. Emma noticed something painful in his eyes. Not anger. Regret, and for the first time since meeting him, she realized Mason carried ghosts too. Big ones. Then he looked at her. You should leave town. Emma blinked. What? They'll keep coming. No. Emma. I said no. Her voice surprised even herself. Mason stared at her for several seconds. You don't understand these people. No, Emma said quietly, you don't understand me. The wind howled around them. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I spent years being scared, she whispered. I hid from bullies. I watched my mom suffer. I watched people destroy our lives because they thought we were weak. Her voice cracked harder now. I'm tired of running. Something shifted in Mason's expression. Respect. Real respect. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt strong. But strength always comes with a price. The next morning, Black Creek woke up to terrifying news. A body had been found near the county line. Beaten badly. Still alive. Barely. The victim was Deputy Collins, the corrupt officer who helped Sheriff Mercer attack Emma's family. Rumors spread instantly. Some claimed the Hell's Angels did it. Others whispered about the Reapers arriving in town. Fear crawled across Black Creek like poison. Businesses closed early. Parents kept kids home. People locked doors before sunset. And then the rumors got worse. Because somebody spray-painted warnings across buildings overnight. The Reapers own this town now. Emma saw one, painted beside the remains of Rosie's grill. Her mother quietly broke down crying beside it. I just wanted a normal life, Rosie whispered. Emma hugged her tightly. But deep down, she feared normal was gone forever. Later that evening, Mason brought Emma to an old garage outside town. Not the abandoned one from before. This place was hidden deep in the woods. Inside were dozens of motorcycles, weapons, maps, and men watching every entrance carefully. The atmosphere felt tense. Warlike. A younger biker named Rico approached Mason immediately. They crossed the river. How many? At least 30. Emma's stomach tightened. 30. Mason nodded slowly. Then he looked toward Emma. You shouldn't be here. I wanted answers. You won't like them. Emma folded her arms. Try me. Mason stared at her for a long moment before finally sitting down beside an old wooden table. Years seemed to fall onto his shoulders instantly. The Reapers and I used to ride together. Emma blinked in surprise. What? Long time ago. The garage grew quieter around them. Mason's voice lowered. We weren't good men. No one interrupted him. 20 years ago, we ran guns, drugs, protection jobs. Towns feared us. Emma watched him carefully. But eventually, Mason continued, some of us wanted out. And the others didn't. Mason nodded once. The Reapers believed fear was power. Innocent people got hurt. Families disappeared. Rosie would have never imagined the intimidating biker sitting quietly before Emma once belonged to something that monstrous. but Emma saw genuine pain in his eyes. What happened? Mason looked away. My younger brother Caleb tried leaving the club. Silence. They murdered him. Emma's chest tightened. What? Mason swallowed hard. They made it look like an overdose. The garage stayed completely silent now. Even the bikers nearby lowered their heads respectfully. Mason continued quietly. I spent years hunting the men responsible. Emma suddenly understood. This wasn't just about biker wars. This was personal. Very personal. The Reapers think I betrayed them, Mason said, and now Mercers arrest embarrassed powerful people connected to them. Emma slowly pieced it together. They want revenge. Mason looked directly at her. No. His voice turned colder. They want to send a message. That night Emma couldn't sleep. Rain tapped softly against the trailer windows, while Rosie finally rested on the couch nearby. But Emma's mind kept replaying everything. The bullying. The fire. Tyler dying. The sheriff. Now this. She quietly stepped outside around 2 a.m. The woods surrounding the trailer moved gently in the moonlight. Then she noticed someone sitting beside a motorcycle near the road. Mason. Alone. Emma walked over carefully. You ever sleep? Mason smirked faintly without looking up. Not much anymore. Emma sat beside him on the cold grass. For a while neither spoke. Only crickets and distant thunder filled the silence. Then Emma noticed something in his hand. An old photograph. She leaned slightly closer. A young man stood beside a teenage Mason smiling at the camera. Brothers? Caleb, she asked softly. Mason nodded. He was 17 there. Emma looked carefully at the photo. He looks kind. He was. The biker stared at the picture quietly. He used to help stray dogs off highways, couldn't even watch scary movies. Emma smiled faintly. That doesn't sound very biker. Mason chuckled softly for the first time. No, it didn't. The smile faded quickly, though. They beat him to death behind a bar. Emma's heart sank. Mason's voice became distant. I found him 3 days later. Silence swallowed the night again. Emma slowly realized something important. People feared Mason because of how he looked. But underneath all that rage was grief. Years and years of grief. Then Mason looked at her unexpectedly. You remind me of him. Emma blinked. What? You still care about people after everything they did to you. The words hit her harder than expected. Because nobody had ever described her that way before. Not strong. Not brave. Caring. Emma looked down quietly. I don't feel strong. You are. Then headlights appeared down the road. Vast. Both stood instantly. A truck skidded near the trailer entrance. Rico jumped out breathless. They found Lily. Everybody froze. Where? Mason demanded. Old factory near Gray County. Lily ran outside immediately. My mom. Rico hesitated. She's alive. Alive. But his expression told another story. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The factory smelled like rust and blood. Emma regretted coming the second they entered. Broken machinery towered through the darkness, while flashlights swept across cracked concrete floors. The Hells Angels moved cautiously. Weapons ready. Lily clung tightly to Rosie's hand. Then they found her mother. Chained to a metal pipe. Bruised terribly. Barely conscious. Lily screamed and ran toward her. Mom! The woman opened swollen eyes weakly. "Baby." Rosie immediately started crying. Emma felt sick at the sight. But then Mason noticed something beside the woman. A camera. Still recording. And suddenly he understood. "This is bait," he whispered. Too late. Explosions shattered the upper windows instantly. Gunfire erupted from catwalks above. Everyone dove for cover. The factory exploded into chaos. Bullets ripped through machinery. Lily screamed. Rosie pulled her behind concrete barriers, while bikers returned fire upward. Emma's heart hammered violently. Then she saw them. Reapers. At least 20. Skull patches. Black helmets. Advancing through smoke like ghosts. And at the center of them stood a giant man with gray braided hair and dead eyes. Mason froze the second he saw him. "Drex." The man smiled slowly. "Mason." Even across the factory, Emma could feel the hatred between them. Drex stepped forward calmly, while bullets echoed around them. "You should have stayed buried." Mason raised his weapon. "You killed Caleb." Drex laughed softly. "No." Then his eyes darkened. "You did." The words hit Mason hard. Emma saw it immediately. Doubt. Pain. "What's he talking about?" Emma whispered. Nobody answered. Then Drex pointed toward her. "This the girl you're risking everybody for." Mason's jaw tightened. "Leave her out of this." Drex smiled wider. "That's not how war works." Gunfire exploded again. The factory became a nightmare of smoke and screaming metal. Emma crawled beside Rosie protecting Lily, while Mason fought toward Drex through chaos. The two men finally collided near the center machinery. And it looked less like a fight, and more like years of hatred exploding all at once. Punches echoed brutally through the factory. Drex slammed Mason into steel beams. Mason answered with savage blows that split Drex's lip open instantly. The men around them stopped shooting briefly just to watch. Because this wasn't just violence anymore. It was history. Then Drex snarled something that changed everything. "You think Caleb died because of us?" Mason froze mid-punch. Drex leaned closer, smiling through blood. "He died because he was talking to the police." Emma's eyes widened. "No." Mason staggered backward. Shock hit him visibly. Drex laughed harder. "Your sweet little brother sold us out." The world seemed to stop. Even the gunfire faded beneath the weight of those words. Mason looked destroyed. Truly destroyed. Emma realized he never knew the truth. And Drex had waited 20 years to weaponize it. But then something unexpected happened. Lily's mother suddenly screamed from the chains. "He's lying." Everyone turned. The woman coughed weakly. "I was there." Drex's expression changed instantly. "Fear." "She knew Caleb," Mason whispered. The woman nodded painfully. "Caleb was trying to protect witnesses. He wasn't a snitch." Drex pulled a gun immediately. Mason moved faster. The gunshot exploded. Emma screamed. But it wasn't the woman who fell. Drex staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Mason stood in front of the chained woman, breathing heavily. Then police sirens roared outside the factory. Everybody froze again. But this time, state police. Not corrupt deputies. Someone had tipped them off. The Reapers panicked instantly. The factory erupted into madness again, as bikers fled through side exits. Drex glared at Mason one final time before disappearing into smoke. "This isn't over." Then he vanished, and Mason collapsed to one knee. Not from injury. from emotional exhaustion, because the truth about Caleb shattered him. Emma slowly approached. Mason. But the giant biker just stared blankly at the floor. For 20 years, he believed his brother died because he failed him. Now he realized Caleb died trying to save innocent people. Everything changed, and Emma saw tears in Mason's eyes for the first time. Real tears. The aftermath of the factory battle shook the entire state. News channels flooded Black Creek again. Stories spread about biker wars, corruption, kidnappings, and violence. But something else spread too. Support. People finally began seeing Emma differently. Not as trailer trash. Not as the bullied waitress girl. But as a survivor. Flowers appeared outside Rosie's rebuilt restaurant site. Donations flooded in. Letters arrived from strangers. One note made Emma cry hardest of all. You helped people stop being afraid. Thank you. Weeks passed slowly after that. Construction workers rebuilt Rosie's grill faster than expected. Local volunteers helped paint walls. Truckers donated equipment. Even old customers returned daily bringing food and tools. For the first time in years, hope existed again. But Mason kept becoming quieter. Emma noticed it immediately. He disappeared for hours, sometimes days. Something haunted him now. One evening, she finally confronted him near the garage. You're leaving, aren't you? Mason didn't answer. That was answer enough. Emma's chest tightened painfully. You can't. I can. Why? Mason leaned against his motorcycle staring into the sunset. Because this life follows people. Emma shook her head. So eventually people around me get hurt. The words sounded practiced, like he'd repeated them to himself for years. Emma stepped closer. You saved us. For now. You think leaving fixes things. Mason finally looked at her. Sadness filled his eyes. You think I don't want to stay? Silence hit hard between them. Emma realized then how much he cared about them. About her. But fear still owned pieces of him. Then Rosie appeared behind the restaurant carrying fresh coffee. You boys done pretending. Both looked confused. Rosie handed Mason a cup. Your family now. Mason blinked. What? Rosie smiled softly. You heard me. The biker looked genuinely stunned. Nobody had probably called him family in years. Maybe decades. Rosie continued gently. You protected my daughter when nobody else did. Emma watched Mason carefully. The giant biker suddenly looked lost. Almost vulnerable. Rosie squeezed his shoulder softly. You don't have to carry everything alone anymore. And for the first time since Emma met him, Mason truly broke. Not violently. Not angrily. Emotionally. He sat down slowly on the restaurant steps, covering his face with one hand, while silent tears escaped through his fingers. Emma's chest hurt watching it. Because strong people cry differently. Quietly. Like they're ashamed of it. Rosie hugged him anyway. And after a long moment, Mason hugged her back. The reopening day of Rosie's Grill became the biggest event Black Creek had seen in years. People lined the streets before sunrise. Motorcycles filled the parking lot beside pickup trucks and family cars. Children laughed outside. Music played softly from old speakers. Emma stood inside the rebuilt restaurant staring around in disbelief. Everything looked beautiful. New booths. Fresh paint. Warm lights. Hope. Rosie cried 3 separate times before opening. Then finally, the neon sign lit up again. ROSIES Grill. The crowd outside cheered loudly. Emma covered her mouth emotionally. And standing beside the doorway was Mason, watching quietly, protectively, like always. Then an old truck pulled into the parking lot. Everyone turned. A frail elderly man stepped out slowly using a cane. The second Mason saw him, his face changed completely. "Frank," the old man approached carefully. "I heard about Caleb." Mason stared silently. Frank swallowed hard. "I should have told you years ago." Emma realized immediately. Another ghost. Frank's eyes filled with regret. "Caleb saved my daughter from the Reapers." Mason froze. "What?" "He hid her after she witnessed a murder." The old man trembled slightly. "The Reapers found out." Mason looked shattered all over again. Frank continued softly. "Your brother died protecting my family." Silence swallowed the parking lot. Emma felt tears burning her own eyes. Because finally, after 20 years, Mason learned the truth. Not from enemies, not from violence, but from gratitude. Frank handed Mason an old photograph carefully. It showed Caleb smiling beside a little girl. Frank's daughter, alive because of him. Mason stared at the photo for several seconds before his knees nearly gave out. Emma rushed beside him instantly. The biker looked at her, with tears openly falling now. "He really was good." Emma squeezed his hand tightly. "Yes," she whispered. "He was." And for the first time in decades, the guilt finally loosened its grip on Mason's soul. But peace never lasts long in places touched by violence. That night, after the restaurant celebration ended, Emma noticed Mason standing alone beside the highway again. Watching darkness, she walked beside him quietly. "You still think they're coming back?" Mason nodded once. "Drex won't stop." Emma crossed her arms. "Then we face him together." Mason smiled faintly. "You make that sound easy." "It's not." The wind moved gently through the trees. Emma looked toward the stars. "You know what's weird?" "What?" "A few months ago, I thought my life was over because some boys at school hated me." Mason listened quietly. "And now?" She laughed softly through tears. "Now I survived corrupt cops, kidnappings, shootings, biker gangs." She looked at him. "And somehow I'm still here." Mason nodded slowly. "That's because you're stronger than you think." Emma stared at him carefully. Then finally asked the question sitting inside her heart for weeks. "What happens when this is really over?" Mason didn't answer immediately. The silence itself felt emotional. Finally he spoke quietly. "I don't know if people like me get happy endings." Emma stepped closer. "Maybe nobody gets perfect endings." The biker looked at her. "Then what do we get?" Emma smiled faintly through the cold night air. "Second chances." For a long moment, neither moved. Then distant motorcycle engines echoed somewhere beyond the hills. Both turned instantly. Mason's expression hardened again. The peace shattered immediately. Headlights appeared far down the highway. Multiple bikes. Approaching slowly. Emma's heart began pounding. But as the motorcycles got closer, she noticed something strange. No weapons. No aggression. Just riders. Dozens of them. Different clubs. Different patches. One by one, the bikers stopped outside Rosie's grill. Silent. Respectful. Then an older rider stepped forward. "We heard what happened." Mason stayed cautious. The rider nodded toward the restaurant. "Your brother protected people." More bikers removed helmets quietly. We came to pay respect. Emma stared in disbelief as rough-looking men from clubs across the state gathered silently beneath the glowing neon sign. Not for violence, for honor, for Caleb. Mason looked overwhelmed. One biker handed him a small metal patch. An angel wing. For the fallen, he said quietly. Mason took it carefully. And Emma realized something beautiful in that moment. Even in dark worlds, good people still existed. Broken people, dangerous people, but still capable of loyalty, still capable of love. The night grew quieter afterward. Bikers sat outside drinking coffee peacefully, while Rosie laughed with customers inside the restaurant. Emma stood near the doorway watching everything. Then Mason approached beside her. "You okay?" Emma nodded softly. "Yeah." She looked at the glowing restaurant sign. "At least for tonight." Mason followed her gaze. For the first time since the nightmare began, Black Creek didn't feel cursed anymore. Just wounded. Healing slowly. Then Emma noticed something sitting beside the entrance. A new spray-painted message. Not hateful this time. Not threatening. Simple. Protect the innocent. Mason saw it too. And after everything, after all the pain and violence and fear, he smiled. A real smile. But far beyond the town. Deep along the empty highway. A lone motorcycle watched the restaurant lights from darkness. The rider slowly crushed a cigarette beneath his boot, then turned away into the night. Because some wars end quietly, and others only pause before beginning again.